Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Godzilla film podcast episode. I almost halfway done with the Millennium era of Godzilla films. I only got 3 more to go. Right now. I'm doing one. I just entered the Kiryu saga, and they say that it's one of the best Millennium Godzilla films ever made. Yeah, and I gotta agree with the fans who said it. And the first Kiryu movie we will be talking about is the classic Godzilla against Mechagodzilla from 2002. And I know that I already done an episode like this before, but back in October when Fathom Events releases in U.S. theaters for a limited time. I actually done this back with Nathan and Neil. If you want to check that episode, I'll click on the link down below in the descriptions. And speaking of guests, we have a very special guest here tonight. He does podcasts, novels, comments, and reviews. Please welcome Kaiju Noir.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. It is a pleasure to be here.
It was so nice to have you on here, Andrew, and or Andres. I sorry, I was sounds like
No worries.
Yeah,
it happens to me all the time.
So I'm glad to have you on my show, Andres, and we actually met before at G-Fest last year.
Right. We did last year in the vendors room, where I know we spoke a little bit back then, and yeah, it's great to get the chance to talk to you again.
Yep, and we kind of met at G-Fest. You were right next to Alyssa's table, and
yep, that is true.
Yep, and so I'm really glad I got to have you on my show here for now, and I've been looking forward to talk about this classic film with you, and I guess, like I said in the open, is like this. Some fans said this is one of the Kiryu saga is one of the best Millennium Godzilla films ever made, and you kind of agree with the fans.
Yeah. It's definitely been a favorite of mine back in the day where I want to say it was around 2004, 2005. A lot of the Millennium movies were coming out to America on DVD from Sony. And so, yeah, I was in elementary school around that time. So I pretty much grew up with this movie a lot. And its ideas and presentation had always stuck with me. And it's really nice to not only revisit this movie again recently, but it was also really cool to see it up on the big screen last year when Toho had a Fathom Events specifically for that movie for Godzilla's anniversary.
It's very nice to hear. And I was gonna mention that I was gonna ask you like how you discovered this film for the first time, and I think you gave a little bit details of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I would like you to tell me more about it. How you first discovered this film. Try to remember back then, like how you did you discover this on DVD, like when you were little, or?
Yeah. So I remember it was probably Christmas 2004, Christmas 2005. I had received it was either Christmas or my birthday. Now that I think about it, it was like a big DVD box, a 50th Godzilla 50th anniversary DVD box set that pretty much featured like 98, 2000, Godzilla 98, 2000, and like the rest of the Millennium movies up to Tokyo SOS. And oh no, it was actually like a collection of the Heisei double feature DVDs and the Millennium movies and Godzilla 98. It was pretty much like the majority of all of Sony's DVDs, except for like one or two movies, all in one big box set. So it was my first time being able to really discover the majority of the Millennium series through that box set, through Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS, GMK, Megaguirus, and Space Godzilla Destroyer. This box set pretty much was like the start of my Godzilla DVD collection. So yeah, I saw the movie. By then, I'd already grown up watching Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 74 like a million times. So it was really cool to see this brand new, fresh take on Mechagodzilla, where he is in actuality a cyborg. Built around the bones of the original 54 Godzilla. And it was also really cool that this movie, unlike a lot of other Godzilla movies, this one got to have a sequel as well as be like a pseudo direct continuation of like the Showa continuity in a way where it's like, oh, Mothra happened, War of the Gargantuas happened, and then in like supplementary material, it's like pretty much every non-Godzilla Toho movie, kaiju movie Toho made during the Showa era is all canon to the Kiryu duology. So I thought, oh, you know what? This really stood out from this weird, fascinating anthology take on Godzilla during the early 2000s, where every movie pretty much stood on its own, except for these two movies, the Kiryu saga, as fans have called them. And even nowadays, I wouldn't say it's my favorite of the Millennium series. That goes to GMK. That it's like I would say maybe like against Mechagodzilla was my favorite back in the day, but like nowadays I'd say like GMK has taken that spot, but I still definitely have a lot of love and nostalgia for Mechagodzilla. And it's really always interesting to look back on those movies with a fresh new perspective on things.
Wow, that's a really good memory you got there, Andres. And yeah, and I remember those box sets that I've never got the chance to get one of those classic DVD box sets. And
Mhm.
before Criteria made a whole book, Blu-ray collection of the Godzilla
Right.
Shona
Because
eras.
Right, because back in the day, it was pretty much like up in the air as to what company was going to release what Godzilla movie. Maybe it'd be Media Blasters, maybe it'd be Sony, maybe it'd be Classic Media. Who knows? It was pretty much like you take what you can get at that time 20 years ago. And I will say it is insane to think that by next year, all of the Millennium series will have officially been 20 years old.
Y- Yeah, and well, thanks for sharing that great memory you have, Andres. And I would love to talk about how I discovered this film for the first time. I mean, I
Sure.
remember back then. I mean, I think I already brought this up in my previous episode, my GMK podcast episode. That when I first discovered this film for the first time, I went to my local video store called Hollywood Videos. I mean, don't you remember like
Mhm.
one of those old video stores that used to exist? I
Oh yeah,
mean,
yeah. I grew up going to like Hollywood Video and Blockbuster all the time. Every week my
mhm.
dad would take my sister and I there. We'd rent like games and movies, at least like one game or one movie every week. It was actually Hollywood Video. That was where I discovered the old HBO VHS tape of Godzilla vs. Biollante, as well as like Rodan and Monsters from a Prehistoric Planet, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, oh yeah, those are the classics. I mean, so yeah, like so this is the same my local video store that I rented that movie on DVD along with the GMK DVD, which I mentioned in my previous episode. And I like I actually rented those two, the GMK and Against Mechagodzilla. I mean, first I first I watched Against Mechagodzilla first because Mechagodzilla is kind of a popular Godzilla enemy.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, and when I watched it, and then yes, I remember when I watched the opening, I thought the theme sounds familiar because it is the same music from versus Megaguirus, and
Yeah.
it's made by the same woman who
Right.
directed the music.
Trying to see. I remember I had my notes here. It was let's see. Oh yeah, Michiru Oshima, who in recent years appeared at G Fest. I want to say 2018 or 2019, I want to say.
Oh wow, that many years ago she's been to G Fest.
Yeah, yeah, she's been to G Fest like one or two times. I remember she and an American composer was his name John DeSantis, I think. They both did a concert, an orchestral concert at G Fest. What was it called? Symphonic Fury. And it was sort of like a concert with a lot of music that she composed. I guess she and DeSantis composed together, sort of like telling the story of a kaiju attack on Chicago, and I think also like Godzilla came in to save the day. So it was sort of like a concert of a score to a imaginary Godzilla movie in Chicago.
Hmm. That's interesting. And so yeah, and then when I watched the opening, I thought this film is like a sequel to Godzilla versus Megaguirus, but nope, it's another standalone film reboot.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to look at Masaki Tezuka's like sort of like pseudo trilogy of movies, Mechagodzilla, X Mechagodzilla, and Tokyo SOS. They all sort of feature very similar themes, very similar styles, visually, audibly, on writing story wise. You've got yourself, Michiyo Oshima, who's doing the compositions, the scores for all three movies. He directed all three movies. Even I would say like the basic premise of Against Mechagodzilla is virtually identical to Megaguirus, to the point where it's almost like Megaguirus was like a prototype to Godzilla X Mechagodzilla. Sorry if I
Yeah.
keep switching back between the Japanese and American title. For me personally, X Mechagodzilla just rolls off the tongue much more. Why didn't go with that for the official English title, who knows? But yeah, both movies feature a stoic female protagonist who loses someone very close to them within the military from a previous Godzilla attack, and both protagonists then try to redeem themselves. It's pretty much the exact same plot. And
Yeah,
from what I hear, I think the writer of this movie also has had a habit of basically writing the same story for all of the movies he's worked on.
yeah, and I gotta say that both Godzilla versus Megaguirus and Against Mechagodzilla both share continuity, and yeah, and they both the plot and then some of the sets are sort of similar to Megaguirus, because
Mhm.
what you explained in the beginning that when after Godzilla appears, the military try to stop it with the laser hands, and then some of the colleagues got killed by Godzilla, and it kind of looks similar to Megaguirus because in Megaguirus, their commander officer was crushed by Godzilla and before the opening title.
Yeah, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if like the writer or the director just wanted to just sort of do the same movie again, but it's like, oh, let's see what new spin we can do on this same premise.
Yeah, and speaking of director, so the director of this film, he's the same director who directed Megaguirus and for Tokyo SOS, and then
Yeah.
in the next film, I mean, I actually got, I think I actually got to meet the director. Yeah, this was back at G Fest in 2015. That was the year that I went to G Fest for the very first time.
That
That
is
was
amazing, man.
Yeah, and I'm glad I got to meet him, and yeah, and he was my first Toho Godzilla person I got to meet at at a convention event. So
Mhm.
yeah, that photo was from my very first G Fest event, and I went.
That is awesome. It's very interesting because I also had the chance to have met him in person back in 2019. So like almost every year in Japan, there's an event called Godzilla Fest, not to be confused with Chicago's G Fest.
Yeah,
Godzilla Fest is pretty much held by Toho around what was it, Hibiya, where like the new Shin Godzilla statue is at, and there would be like little carnival games for little kids, and at night there would be interviews with several past directors of the Godzilla from the Godzilla franchise. And I was there in 2019 with Matt Burkett of Monstrosities, his wife, and our mutual friend Norman England. And as we were like walking around Godzilla Fest, we happened to have just stumbled upon a number of people that Norman knew personally. Because if you don't know, Norman England was
Oh
a
yeah.
journalist for Fangoria magazine, and he had interviewed many of the actors, directors, and filmmakers on the sets of all the Millennium movies, and to write articles for Fangoria. And so he has gotten to know and befriend a lot of the people who used to work on the Godzilla films. And out of nowhere, we just happened to have run into Tezuka, and like Norman recognized him. They both chatted. Matt and I, we just asked if we can take a photo with him. He was like a very nice guy, very friendly, very casual. So I wish I could have found that photo, because we did take photos, but unfortunately I couldn't find it in time for this live stream. But yeah, I just find it very funny that we're reviewing a movie made by a director that both of us have met in person at two different points.
That's very cool, Andres. I mean, and yeah, Norman England is an awesome guy. He's the one who did some. He the one who did also did some behind the scenes for GMK and some other Millennium Godzilla films. See,
Yeah. He was there for every one of the Millennium movies, along with Gamera 3. And he had recently, not re- yeah, he had recently, within like the last 2 years, have produced a book called Behind the Kaiju Curtain, which is pretty much all of his like sort of like tell all recollection of events based on all the notes he had written and the articles he had written, from his time on the set. So yeah, I highly recommend Norman England's book Behind the Kaiju Curtain, where if you want to have like an in-depth behind the scenes look at what it's like behind the scenes of a Godzilla film.
Hey, that's cool. And I actually have one of his books. I I actually got one of his two books, and the one you just mentioned, and his new book that just released like months ago.
Yes,
Yeah, I actually got one
I
of his
believe Ring of
books.
Fire. That is
Yep,
amazing, man.
and yeah, his work is amazing. And yeah, and he was also in Tokyo SOS and that one small scene. It's like who misfire and
Yeah. He got to have
and
like cameos, like blink and you miss it cameos in various different various different Millennium movies. And thanks, Nick. We have Nick in the chat here. He says we have the book Ring of Fear. Yes, Ring of Fire is Johnny Cash. My bad. I very apologize
yeah,
for getting the title of
yeah.
the book wrong.
Hey. So, yeah, I mean Norman England, he was in Tokyo SOS in that one second scene, and but I'll mention in my next episode, and and speaking of which, so let's talk about the film. I mean, how did it all begin? I mean,
Mhm.
so right after GMK was made, I mean, Toho decided they want to make three more Godzilla films that there'd be a trilogy. Yeah. So yeah, the Kiryu saga was gonna have a trilogy that if they were making one more Kiryu movie, they will call it the Kiryu trilogy.
That would have been very interesting if that were to have happened. I'm assuming that maybe they decided to just, for whatever reason, maybe they just didn't think that the Kiryu films were up to par. I know that the was it Tokyo SOS ended on a cliffhanger that potentially could have led to a third movie, but my assumption is that Toho just saw the box office results from both movies. They said, you know what, this probably isn't going to work, because this was definitely during a time when the mainstream Japanese interest in Godzilla was sharply declining year after year after year. Like, as much as we all love these Millennium movies, the fact of the matter is, this was during that time when people were just in Japan just did not care about Godzilla anymore as much as they did in the 90s. And as someone who has lived in Japan for 6 years, that attitude certainly persists to this very day. So I'm assuming that during this time in the 2000s, Toho was sort of like, let's try something. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if that doesn't work, we'll just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. So um, once the Kiryu saga wrapped up, they're probably like, you know what? Let's go in a very different direction. Let's go, all out crazy with it. Let's get that director from Versus and let's see what he can do.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, but they decided to go with two films because they explained the ending of Tokyo SOS. I mean, as we all know, like, so when it's, I would like to talk about the, uh, well, before I talk about the opening, and I know I already mentioned it, but they for the writer of this, that's the same writer who writes Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, Space Godzilla, I think Godzilla 2000. And before that writer wrote for Against Mechagodzilla, there was also an outside writer who was going to write for the next Godzilla film, but Toho decided they didn't take his script for the next film.
Hmm.
I think that's what I heard.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Uh, So yeah, what I heard this film, they do like a lot of blue screens and some way better CGI moments in this film. Because
Hmm.
some of the previous Millennium era films, some CGIs and green or blue screens are just terrible looking, especially for Godzilla 2000. Like,
Right, right. I didn't. I have noticed that when it comes to the Millennium series, they were definitely very experimental with the use of digital effects, whether it was like green screen compositing or just CGI effects. And I noticed, yeah, with this movie as well, there's a lot of instances where they would just put the monsters behind blue screens and have them sort of like move around like it's like an anime movie, especially when you have like Mechagodzilla just like jumping like hundreds, thousands of feet into the air, or just like smashing into Godzilla, causing them to fly in a straight horizontal line into a building, stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, but and I know that, but uh, like for GMK, the CGI effects in GMK weren't as bad, but for Against Mechagodzilla, the CGI and the blue screen effects and are got a lot much better than the previous films. Yeah, and it's like when Godzilla first appears, like in the during the hurricane scene and
Hmm.
or the thunderstorms, and they when they actually use a blue screen of that scene. And I would love to talk about the Godzilla suit in this, the Kiryu Goji. That's what they call it.
Yeah, yeah. It's honestly, it's my favorite ever Godzilla design. It's basically they took the 2000 Mechagearus design, slimmed him down, give him the classic traditional colors of charcoal gray and silver, and give him a blue atomic breath. And presto, you have yourself a very awesome, cool, wicked Godzilla design.
Yeah, I agree. When I watch this film, this suit does look similar to the 2001. Yeah, yeah, except it's not green or with purple spines, and it's just they went back to his original uh color design looked.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and on top of that, it seemed like this suit was a lot more flexible for the suit actor Tsutomu Kitagawa to move around in. I felt like this suit was a lot more expressive compared to the suit that he had in his last two films.
yeah, I mean like he wasn't in GMK because of the Godzilla suit, and that one was too big for him.
Right, so
And
they had Mizuho Yoshida to come in to portray that Godzilla.
that's right. And yeah, then when I want to talk about more of the design of this. I mean, like
Mhm.
I know in the Godzilla suit from the two films, 2000 and Megaguirus. I mean the face of they give Godzilla a more like a dragon lizard face look to it. I mean, because you could tell like how it looks like a dragon a cross between a dragon and a lizard reptile looking.
Right, right, yeah, he's definitely got a more reptilian look compared to the more, like, mammalian features of, like, the '90s, '80s Godzillas.
Yeah, but this Godzilla in this one, I know it looks similar to the 2001, but the head in this for this, it kind of almost some fans it kind of reminds them, including me. It kind of looks like a wolf looking face.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you look the head carefully at it, it kind of does look like a wolf a little bit, except it has no ears and except it has teeth showing.
Right, right. By the way, I love Laura's comment where she said if they would have made Godzilla versus Megaguirus 2, the Godzilla franchise would have never slowed down. I know she's a huge fan of that film.
Yeah, Eh, yeah, and kind of agreed. And also, and speaking of 2000, as I mentioned this a few minutes ago, I mean, there's
Mhm.
there's also an actor in this film from 2000 who plays the dad. I mean, and who searched for Godzilla. He makes a cameo in this one.
Oh, really? Which character did he portray?
Well, he's only in the beginning. All of his soda cans got knocked over, and he's trying to pick them up. And he saw
Ah,
the military tanks and the laser cannons, and trying to stop Godzilla. Yeah, and I also love that one line when they're saying like, "Why does this always happen in the rain?" In the in the English dub, and
mhm.
so yeah, and also, did you know that scene where I hope that's not a kaiju in your room, is it?
Oh no, it's all right. It's just background noise right now. Sorry about that.
Okay, okay, cool. Because I thought it was like because a moment I thought it was like a giant kaiju in your room or one of the Meganula creatures.
No, no, no need for concern there.
Okay, so where was I? Oh, anyway, yeah, so the scene where Godzilla appears in the little village when people are panicking. When they were filming Godzilla films, when people are running in a panic, and well, if you look carefully at one of the shots, I mean, one of the people were running, especially when there's some children running in that one scene. I mean, if you look at that kid's face carefully, you can tell that she was kind of smiling, and it looks like she's having fun during filming.
Yeah, that has always been like a one of those issues that has been like very common throughout the Godzilla franchise. There's always going to be some extra in the crowd shots that's always smiling when they really shouldn't be. Just one of those things that's like an ever-present, uncontrollable factor when you're dealing with dozens, if not hundreds, of extras for these movies.
Eh, Yeah, and I also like the part when the guy is trying to get back to his house, and he's like, "That's my house." But the officer told him back off, but it was too late. Godzilla just stomps on the guy's house. Like, it's like I feel sorry for the
Right.
guy.
Yeah, that does remind me. There was like one particular Easter egg that I didn't knew about until recently, where in the scene where the scientist's daughter Sada, when she's walking with her friends to her new home at the military base, one of her friends happens to be carrying a hamster with her. And both the little girl and that hamster are supposed to be the main characters from the anime Hamtaro, which
Oh
during this
yeah,
time
Hamtaro.
Godzilla and Hamtaro used to have like an ongoing collaboration where you would go to the theaters and have a double feature where you get to watch one Godzilla movie, one Hamtaro movie back to back. So it was kind of funny to see like they just put a live action version of Hamtaro right there in the movie for that one scene.
Yeah, they actually did, and yeah, they actually did that for when GMK was released in theaters.
Yeah, that's very true as well. I'm not sure how long this collaboration lasted, but it was definitely like a very prominent part of the Millennium series.
Yeah, and also we had Gojira 85-1. How's it going? I had
Hey,
him.
nice of you to join us.
I had him on my Space Godzilla episode,
Awesome.
and like I want to talk about the actress, the main character who runs Kiryu, and his name Atari. Atara. What's her character's name? Like Atari.
Let's see. It is Akane. Akane.
Yeah, and yeah, and yes, I would like to talk about her because I actually did met her at G Fest this year, and I don't have a photo frame, but I have it on my phone. Like,
That is great, man.
yep, this was from G Fest this year, and I actually got an autograph with her and took pictures, it and it's so cool that they have the kiryu statue like beside her table.
Hmm. That is
Yeah,
really cool to hear.
and
It's a nice way of like letting everyone know who might not have known that she was there, where exactly what film she came from.
yeah, she was really nice. I got a picture with her, and yeah, and when I heard in real life that she was actually a live model, and
Oh yeah,
and
I did hear that she did modeling prior to becoming an actress.
and yeah, and so yeah, it was me and her at G Fest this year was such an experience. I got a picture with her and then got an autograph with her. It's almost like I met the pilot of Kiryu.
And that is awesome to hear, dude.
Yeah, and what I heard that it sometimes I forget her character's name. It is Atani. Like I think it's
Akane.
Akane. Yeah, and what I heard that I think I already mentioned this earlier, like in Megagiras, and there was an accident with the commander officer, but yes, in this one they that her character is just yeah was trying to back up the vehicle from Godzilla, but her vehicle turned that one of her colleagues just knocked their Jeep down, and then they kind of made Godzilla stomp on them, and they after they crash.
Hmm.
That that's almost like they kind of took that from Megaguirus in the beginning. That's
Right, right. Like I mentioned at the earlier in the live stream that this was pretty much like the exact same setup across both films.
yeah, and I also love the lighting effects they add for Godzilla, and before a few seconds before the opening title, all the lighting
Oh
on
yeah,
Godzilla.
yeah, yeah. Where his in this duology, I think it was the only time they ever did this, where the spines would flicker on and off prior to him shooting off his atomic breath.
Yeah, and it, yeah, so yeah, that scene I thought that scene was so cool, and also when I want to mention that this film, I mean, this film was, I know it follows up to the original Godzilla. I know some of the Millennium era films they always follow up to the original 54 film, but for against Mechagodzilla, it's not just following the original the original 1954 one. It also follows up some other Shona era kaiju films like
Mhm.
Mothra and and War of the Gargantulas.
Right, right. And we have the maser cannons throughout this movie. That is one of my what at first when I was younger, that was one of the connections to the Showa movies. It was always one of the things I thought was really cool and what made this movie so unique from previous Godzilla films of this era. However, nowadays I really kind of wish that they would have gone further with the Showa connections because I feel like you can take out all those references and literally nothing about this movie would change. Honestly, this movie feels like it could have been in continuity with Megaguirus or or Godzilla 2000, and like nothing about the story would ever change. So, and I feel like this is one of those things that I think Tokyo SOS did better, where it did made an effort to say, hey, since this is in continuity with the old Showa movies, let's bring more stuff from the Showa movies and make it a core part of the story, which turned out to be Mothra's twins, where instead of being born in 1964, they hatched from their eggs in the modern day of 2003, 2004. So yeah, unfortunately, as cool as it was to have seen these little nods to the Showa stuff, I feel like personally it did not add anything to the story in any significant way other than, hey, look, cool Easter eggs or cool cameos.
Yeah, and I love the flashbacks, how they tell the story of the original Godzilla in
Yeah,
1954.
yeah.
I mean the Prime
And I
Minister
believe
of,
I think they even went out of their way to construct a new 1954 suit, but only from like the head to the knees, because that's
yeah,
all that was ever in frame.
yeah, because and also the Millennium Godzilla suit actor actually played in that suit. When I
Nice.
watched this, I mean, I know some
Hmm.
fans said they thought that was all CGI, some bad
Hmm.
CGI looking, but no, they actually use a real suit for this
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that part. And
Like almost like an incomplete suit, but a suit that was just simply made for that one shot, and it got the job done pretty well.
yeah, I wonder whatever happened to that half of the suit. I mean, I don't.
More than likely, it is what happened to that suit is what happens to all of Toho's suits because they hardly ever take care of their old movie props. They just put it in a shed and left to rot as the decades go by. Recently, this week, there was a commercial for I forgot, it was like a Japanese trading company, and they featured a refurbished GMK King Ghidorah there alongside like samurais and zombies and a meteor comet. It's like a really wild, crazy commercial that I think was really well done. But like they had like a behind the scenes featurette that they put out online as to like what was the state of the King Ghidorah suit prior to their refurbishment, and just like the King Ghidorah suit, this like 22-year-old prop is just in complete and utter tatters where like the scales are falling off, the skin is
Yeah,
cracking, it's lost its golden sheen, it's lost its color. It's just like, and I've seen like many photos, so many of those suits from like the 90s and 2000s are all in such really poor, sad states of decay. So I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up happening to the 54 costume.
yeah. It's like I say. I mean, I know they got rid of that suit. I mean, I don't know, but they kept it in the shade. But if they would have kept that suit, they would have put it in the museum, like in the Godzilla museum, so the ones they have in Japan.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also and also
Hmm.
this film brought back the Shona legendary Kamumi Mizuno.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They brought in several very classic
Yeah,
Toho actors to do play the prime minister from 99 and 2003.
yeah, and she also plays one of my favorite characters in Ebra Horror the Deep, Dio.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I remember her because that was that was my very first Godzilla movie.
Yeah, and yeah, she only plays in a few scenes in this film as the prime minister, and that she also
Right.
tells the backstory about the 54 Godzilla, and I gotta say but I know in the original, after after Sarasawa released his Oxygen Destroyer to destroy Godzilla, that Godzilla dissolves into bones, and the bones disappeared in the
Right.
original.
But
But
not here.
yeah, in this but in this film, in this Millennium universe, I mean the bones just remain.
Right,
Uh,
right, and that's what led to that ended up leading to the premise of this film in particular. Yeah, yeah. And I do gotta say the everything involving like the construction of Mechagodzilla, involving the bones of the '54 Godzilla, I thought was like the coolest idea ever, and I
yeah.
like that they in my opinion, this is like my biggest issue with the movie, and that is I feel like it didn't go far enough in terms of that sort of like split personality between Kiryu the machine and Kiryu the kaiju. I feel like there was that great scene where as soon as like Kiryu hears Godzilla's roar, it remembers when it too used to be Godzilla and then goes on a
Y-
rampage. And as cool as that was, it's like a subplot that's completely dropped from the movie and it's never really touched upon again. So like I really wish they would have like had that plot line of like maintaining control over Mechagodzilla, or maybe even just them completely losing control with Mechagodzilla because they attempted to play God or whatever. It seemed like a really cool idea that just is completely dropped for the climax. Mechagodzilla going berserk never happens again for the rest of the movie. And I feel like
y-
it's such a shame because it's such a really cool idea that could have gone into some really interesting places. Like, wasn't it like there was like an original ending? Maybe this is for Tokyo SOS. I think there was like an ending that Shinji Nishikawa ended up drawing where they had this ending where Mechagodzilla just basically rips off all of its metal armor,
Ooh.
showcasing this living horrific skeleton and wires and all that stuff. Basically, it was trying to like pull an Evangelion and just break apart this organic creature's ripping apart its metal cage of a skin. I don't know. It just seemed like there could have been so many directions they could have gone in with Berserk, Cyborg, Mechagodzilla that for whatever reason they didn't. And so
It,
for the climax, it sort of goes in a very typical, I would almost say, mecha anime direction for its climax, because it's a thing like I'm a big fan of mecha anime. I love me some Getter Robo, Mazinger Z, Gundam, what have you, and that whole relationship between the pilot and the robot is very that's you've seen a lot of mecha anime is very much so infused into the characterization of Akane during the climax, where basically the pilot often talks to their giant robot as if it was like
and
a living, breathing thing, and that's
I'm sorry,
exactly what she does.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I am
No, go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt you. I mean, yeah, I was gonna say I kind of agree with you what you said in the beginning. Like, it was a
Hmm.
cool idea that they built Mechagodzilla out of the bones out of the original. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, when I first brought it up, I thought it was like cool. This is kind of makes me think this is a little bit of a Frankenstein style to it. It's like they have
Hmm.
created a mechanical machine out of bones of a monster. Yeah, this is kind of give it a little
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Frankenstein moment.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. And like even what was it? The daughter, Sada, she was always a few times in the movie she would comment how it's unfair of them to treat this supposedly living cyborg being as a tool and nothing more. And she's like, "Oh, you brought this creature to life, and why are you being so disrespectful with this thing?" And again, it's like that's another really cool, interesting idea that they never touch upon again. I feel.
yeah, and so and I mentioned and I did mention this in my Godzilla versus King Ghidorah podcast episode with Daniel
Hmm.
back in April, and is it that is is that I did mention that like when the Godzillasaurus becomes Godzilla after hit by some after it got hit by the nuclear submarine accident, and like this is
Hmm.
kind of makes me think it's like Anakin becomes like Darth Vader moment. It's just kind of like
I can
that.
see that. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
And this one, when I mentioned they took the bones from the original Godzilla, turned into Mechagodzilla, and kind of makes me think of like Anakin becoming Darth Vader when they put the Darth Vader suit on.
Hmm. Yeah,
This is
yeah. I definitely see the comparisons there. Just this like sad, tortured soul trapped in this metal um, prison. In fact, this kind of reminded me of this. Like, I forgot who made this animation. It was like one of those like source filmmaker fan animations where someone actually went out of their way to recreate that scene from Revenge of the Sith, but using the character models of Kiryu and Destroya in place of Darth Vader and the Emperor. I haven't seen, I don't know who made that. I really wish I did. Maybe it was like Ultraman Ultimo or Toku Society, one of those two, I want to say. But it was like a really fun parody. And it's kind of funny that you brought that up because I just remembered that from all those years ago.
yeah, and I guess say I mean when I like to talk about Kiryu, I mean, I've always been curious when I watched this film. I mean, the title is called Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, but in the
Yeah.
film they call him Kiryu. That's kind
Hmm.
of like for short for Mechagodzilla. I mean,
I know, like Kiryu, it's Japanese for metal dragon, and it's a cool name. I think it suits the character itself. But you're right; it is weird that as much as Toho likes to, put specific branding on every single one of their characters, their intellectual properties, for whatever reason, they decided to give this Mechagodzilla two names, even within the film itself. You have the little kid who says he's a robot a robot Godzilla, a Mecha Godzilla, if you will. And then later in the movie, once he's done, he's all constructed. They're like, "This is now Kiryu." My only guess is that maybe the writer or the director, or maybe the concept artist, or maybe someone at one of the producers at Toho, maybe someone at Toho simply said, "You know what? We've had enough of Mechagodzilla. Let's try something new with Kiryu and see how that works."
yeah, and
Maybe not. It's just very strange because even nowadays, Japan, like Godzilla's always like, not Godzilla. Toho is always like, we got to stay on brand. Godzilla's always got to use the same roar every single time. We can't do much with the character's name. Well, I'd say in like recent years, they would say, okay, we're allowed to make variants of Godzilla, but I don't know. It just seems to me like they're so insistent on maintaining that sort of brand synergy. It's interesting to see how they were willing to say, hey, you know what? Let's just completely rebrand this thing. This isn't Godzilla anymore. This is like MSF Kiryu. They gave him like almost like a serial number, like a mobile suit, like the RX 7802 Gundam, something like that. Maybe
uh,
this goes further into like the mecha anime connection. Maybe the guy was like, you know what, I want to give Mecha Godzilla a very mecha anime name. So you know what,
yeah,
screw it. MSF3 Kiryu. I could be getting that name wrong.
yeah, yeah. Kiryu, the name kind of fits with this. Like it does kind of fit, and it's and also I want to like so what you brought up about the when they build the Godzilla bones in the machine. I mean, and also when they brought in Mega Godzilla to fight Godzilla for the first time. I mean, and also before that, during that when the Jets are carrying Kiryu in the air and they fly over a baseball field with a group of baseball kids, and
Yeah, yeah.
I
And we
heard,
actually had like a cameo from that. There's this one baseball player in particular who was a real life baseball player who was there as a
yeah, he,
cameo. They even gave him a chance to do like like in a home run, hitting a ball right out the stadium, just to say, "Hey guys, remember this awesome all star baseball player? Look how awesome he is, even in Godzilla movies."
yeah, I I keep forgetting his name was. I mean, he does make a cameo in a Godzilla film. Yeah, and also like
Oh, sorry, I got sorry to interrupt you. I just got to say, I love Laura's comment here, where like they were trying to ride that Yakuza video game money train with the Kiryu name. That's right, the main character. I haven't played the Yakuza series, but I believe the main character's name is Kiryu. So I don't know if Yakuza was a thing back in 2002. Maybe so. I know nothing about the franchise, but that would be that would be funny.
yeah, and
I will say, more than likely, it is a crazy thought. More people out there know more about Kiryu, the Yakuza video game character, than they do Kiryu, the Mechagodzilla cyborg character monster thing. Because
yeah,
Yakuza is such like a big popular video game series, even in
yeah,
America now.
like I've never even heard or played that game before.
Oh, it's very popular from what I understand. And yeah, main character's name is Kiryu. So if you talk to any Sega fan, they'll probably, when you mention the name Kiryu, they're gonna think of Yakuza.
Yeah, it, it like here's my songy catchphrase. Kier EU. Get it? Because care, like you care, like care
Mhm.
EU. Get it? Because the letter E, and then
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I thought that's like a
Anyway, sorry to
catchphrase.
interrupt you. No
Oh, that's
worries.
okay.
What were you saying what were you saying before?
So
The
I was
baseball parts.
well, I don't. Well, I was gonna say after they had the Just Carry Kiryu arrive to fight Godzilla. I mean, the first
Mhm.
fight in this doesn't even do much. I mean, they
Right.
just have Godzilla standing there, and he's just like completely sterile after he get hit by a few missiles, and then they hit him with the laser cannon from Kiryu's mouth, and he does make him back up a little bit, and yeah, and I would like to talk about the newest weapon they have for Mechagodzilla or Kiryu is the
Mhm.
absolute zero. It's the zero cannon. Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah, it's a really cool invention for this movie. It's something so simple yet so effective in the film. I think it's just a freeze ray. We've seen that sort of stuff all the time in science fiction. Heck, one of Batman's most popular villains uses nothing but freeze ray technology. And so to just take this, a Mechagodzilla, redesign Mechagodzilla, give him a laser from his chest, another mecha anime trope, and just
mm,
turn into like a freeze ray. I think was a really cool idea. I like that it was set up at the beginning, and how there's a lot of build up to time to use the absolute zero cannon.
mm,
But something always gets in the way, whether it's Kiryu malfunctioning or Godzilla throwing off Mechagodzilla's aim, or if it's like Kiryu just like running out of power. There's always something that gets in the way of this very overpowered plot device, which I thought was very well handled. And so by the time he finally uses that absolute zero cannon at the end of the movie, it's such like a very satisfying moment to end the movie in a very solid way, I think.
yeah, but and sadly the main weapon like never happened. They never used it on Godzilla, and they just like
Mhm.
do that. Like I like the video test that they did, and they freeze a building first, and they it's
Yeah.
almost it's almost like you're turning Godzilla into like a freezing like one of those prehistoric species that they went extinct like years ago, like the woolly mammoth. But this
Right,
one
right,
is
right.
it's
Putting
kind of
him
like
on
they're
ice.
yeah, it's kind of like they're making Godzilla into a popsicle.
Yeah.
Uh,
They were trying to make a Snow Godzilla before Snow Godzilla was ever a thing.
yeah, and
If you remember the Shinkalion movie.
oh yeah, the snow Godzilla. I gotta
Yep, there we
give it a
go. There we
try.
go. it's a
Yeah,
it's a fun movie, even if you've never watched the anime. Shinkalion the movie it's a fun time.
yeah, and also one of my favorite parts, and I know everyone thought this is like the best Godzilla moment that it was ever made. That Godzilla lets out a war that kind of affects Kiryu. Like it's kind
Yeah.
of like it's almost like Godzilla just woke up the spirit of the original Godzilla that
Oh
brought
yeah, yeah.
they brought it back from the dead.
Absolutely. And I think it's perhaps I don't know if if I would say it's the best moment in the movie, but I would say it's certainly my favorite moment from the whole movie.
Yeah, it's like my favorite moment, and yeah, and yeah, at the Lesser Award, and they it kind of is like Kiryu is just remembering. It just it's kind of like Godzilla just remind Kiryu that
Hmm.
Godzilla is kind of like him, like 45 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Even Laura in the comments, she mentioned I always liked that the DNA computer used to make Kiryu was based off rudimentary quantum computing, the four base pairs instead of two. Yeah, I like that they want to go into the details of how this like cyborg technology worked, and I liked how they even foreshadowed it with the scientist when he sort of built a makeshift what do you call, not trilopod, it's a why am I forgetting that? The trilobite, I think that's what it's called. This like
yeah,
ancient crustacean using like horseshoe crab DNA, nerves and muscles, and a metal exterior to his way of like bringing back prehistoric prehistoric life from back from the dead. Thank you very
yeah.
much, Laura. A trilobite, that's what it is. And hey, Joey, thanks for joining us in the chat right now.
Hey,
He says,
Joey.
"Howdy, GXMG is my fave Godzilla film. That is awesome, dude."
Yeah, and I would love to talk about it. Yeah, just that scene what you talk about, the trilobite, is that
Hmm.
prehistoric thing that kind of they found in the original Godzilla. That was in Godzilla's
That's
footsteps.
right. I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah. It was in like buried in like the footprints, or like when Godzilla walked across that island, Dr. Yamane discovered the trilobite and was like, "Hey, this is something that's been dead for millions of years now. What's it doing here?" I didn't even realize if that was like a 54 callback, but if that was the intention, I think that's a really cool neat little Easter egg.
Yeah, and I gotta say the guy who invented that trilobite because in that scene. I forgot his character's name, but the actor in this one,
Ah,
he was also in
he was.
he was in the
Mhm.
Return of Godzilla, and,
Return of.
and
Oh, okay. Was he like the main actor?
he was I think he playing one of the survivors
Oh,
as the
okay.
brother and
Oh, he was the brother. Okay, I did not know that.
yeah, he's
But
in
yeah,
the
the name of the character is Tokumitsu.
Takemisu. Yeah, so he actually brought that trilobite back to life, but he kind of make that as half robots.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of Tokumitsu, I did want to bring him up where I
Uh,
liked I loved his interactions with his daughter. He did bring a bit
yeah,
of a fun, jolly comedic relief to not comedic relief, but he was definitely
uh,
more of the character who brought in that sort of levity to contrast well with Akane's more stoicism. The one thing I did not like though was they were definitely trying to go for like a romantic pairing between the two of them. And even as a kid, it always kind of weirded me out because he looked significantly older than her. And I was thinking, like, is this right? This doesn't feel right. And I was actually like looking up how old each actor was during that time, during the time of the filming. And I found out that, like, Akane is the actress. She was 24 at the time of this movie's release, and Tokumitsu was 46. So like he is like literally twice the age of the pilot. So I just always thought like this almost comes off whenever he was trying to like flirt with her or trying to like ask her out or something. He was trying to come off as like bumbling, quirky, charming, but due to his age, it always kind of came off as really like awkward and creepy in a way. I don't know if that
yeah.
was the intention or not, but it's just the age gap itself was always a big distraction for me personally.
You yeah, I gotta say, and you kind of glitched there, and I think I kind of froze it a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit. I mean,
Okay,
it's
okay. Am I
yeah, I
still
don't know
freezing now?
Well, I don't know. I think I got a glitch on mine. I mean, but I think I'm good for now. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yeah. Can you
I'm just
see?
saying that like I was always weirded out by the age gap between the two leads in the movie.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, this guy is trying to hit. He's trying to hit on her. I mean, he's just like he just wants to make a deal with her that if that if she wins, that he'll have to buy her dinner.
Right, right. And it's like, and if I, yeah, if you beat Godzilla, I owe you dinner. If you lose against Godzilla, you owe me dinner. No, either way, we're gonna have we're gonna go out on a date or whatever. Yeah, even Laura said I always thought that was weird. I thought that maybe he wanted a big sister model for his daughter and was awkward about it. I mean, that does make a lot more sense, but I feel like given the whole,
Yeah,
asking someone out for dinner, that definitely feels like it was intentionally made to be very romantic and when it comes to like the intention behind that scene. I don't know. It feels
yeah.
like they were trying to give like they were trying to say like, oh, this is like a Laura's mentioning, maybe it's like a big sister. Maybe it's like, oh, here's like a new mommy for you. I don't know. Just the whole thing was weird.
and and also I want to talk more back to the trilobite. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
sure.
almost like when this guy like invented that trilobite thing. I mean, it's almost like they give a little Jurassic Park moment to that.
Hmm.
It's like they're trying to bring creatures back to life, and the same thing they did for kiryu, and they build the bones of it. I mean, and that's the one thing I love talking about. I hope I will do a podcast episode about it, about bringing extinct creatures back to life. Like I want to bring back the woolly mammoths. Like those are one of my favorite prehistoric creatures. Like
Hmm.
and
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly a cool concept, and it would have been interesting to have seen what more they could have done with it outside of Mechagodzilla when it comes to this Kiryu duology. But yeah, it's just another one of those things that isn't really talked about or explored in depth once it's introduced. That does remind me of another thing that was again brought up but then abandoned quickly was the idea of the sort of international politics surrounding the creation of Mechagodzilla. Because the moment that the prime minister, played by Kumi Mizuno, brings up the plans to make Mechagodzilla, one of the many questions that the reporters were asking her is, how is the United Nations going to respond to this brand new weapon of mass destruction? Like what's America going to say about it? What's Russia going to say about it? What's China going to say about creating this, gigantic robot, heavily dangerous robot? And she just said, "Oh, the UN will easily understand what we're going through," and then it's just completely dropped. So I know that most likely the writer had no intention of ever making this a political drama, but I feel like that would have been some interesting world building there to see what would have happened in a real world setting if Japan were to create like a big, giant, dangerous weapon of mass destruction like Mechagodzilla. But, hey, that's another story for another potential reboot down the line.
yeah, and I would like to talk about Sarah, the little girl who was carrying
Oh,
the
sure.
plant. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes it kind of bothers me a little bit about her with the plant. I mean, well, but in the film they said that the plant has human spirit in it of her mother.
So I don't think that was meant to be literal. I mean, it was very symbolic in a way. So the
Yeah,
plant, I believe, was a gift from her mother, or maybe like the mother always was a fan of those plants, and she definitely like kept that held on to that plant as a memento of her deceased mother. And by the end of the movie, she no longer holds on to that plant because she has finally sort of like moved on from that a personal loss. She has grieved enough. She's ready to move on with her life. It's sort of like paralleling Akane's journey, where she's trying to move on from her past and her deep-seated emotional loss from 1999. So I guess it was sort of like having a little two characters going through similar thematic emotional journeys, and then both of them arriving to the same conclusion once
mm,
we get to the after credit scene of this movie.
Yeah, and I see like what I heard when that the her mother eh, I know like said that that the planet symbolizes the mother's present like this when that part it always makes me think back to Biolante because remember in Biolante when the Biolante has a human spirit in there like Erica
Hmm.
and but this one is not like it's not
No, no,
like
yeah.
Biolante. It's just
Right, right. It's not spiritual in a literal degree. It's just more, like I mentioned before, more symbolic.
yeah, and well, I heard that the mother in this film they actually died from childbirth.
Right,
Is
right, yeah.
that both her and the child both died, and then
Yeah.
because the guy told uh, uh, told the woman the backstory of how it happened.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a very interesting backstory for these sort of like more uh how do you say, more lighthearted characters. Just because like whenever you have scenes of the father and the daughter, they're definitely much more uplifting compared to Akane scenes. So it is interesting to see them being given this type of backstory to help sort of build a connection between them and Akane.
Yeah, and but so anyway, so let's let's talk. Let's get back to about Kiryu, how it becomes berserk. I mean, by the war of Godzilla. I mean, I know. It's like when I also like the part when after Godzilla retreats back to the sea, and and I know everyone's thought that guy said it in the English style saying Godzilla's gonna get away, but in the Japanese version, people thought that he said something that I kind of don't
Oh
want
yeah,
to
yeah.
bring it up.
I
It's
feel like
thought,
ever since James Rolfe brought that up in Godzillathon, that's the thing that like everybody makes fun of now. Even when I saw the movie on the big screen last year, the moment that he said that certain Japanese line, the whole theater just laughed at it.
yeah, same thing to mine. But I said I think I heard one guy laughing from the back. It was like,
Ah.
yeah, I was like,
Oh
yeah,
well, what can you do?
but anyway, so back to about Kiryu. Like I like the part when they're trying to use the freezer cannon on Godzilla, but it didn't work because of the affection, and then suddenly like it just comes back. It's like the 54 is coming, just came back from the dead,
Hmm.
and then the eyes of it just turn from yellow to red. It's
Hmm.
almost like it's really angry, and then just what I heard that the eyes for that when it changed from yellow to red, it kind of is symbolized. I mean, I but I thought of two things for it. I mean, I know that it just turns red. I mean, it's like it's just go like it's almost like it's a spirit. It's just it's just kind of went back to life and his eyes changed color, or it just went under another control, or is it's just uh, oh, another thing I heard is just so it just turns red and if you look carefully, there's like a line of red on the sides. It's because what I heard is because when the eyes are turned red, I think it says it's like a light of blood. If you see when
Oh yeah, yeah.
the
You can
light,
almost see it, almost like tears of blood as it runs from
yeah,
the eyes down the cheeks. Yeah, yeah. It's a
yeah,
really cool, neat aesthetic for that design. Pretty much like I mentioned before, I love just like not just the face, but just all of Mechagodzilla's design. I feel like Shinji Nishikawa, the concept artist behind these Millennium films and the Heisei films, he did a fantastic job um, designing this new version of Mechagodzilla that's both like familiar and fresh at the same time. It is if you've ever looked at Shinji Nishikawa's older concept art for Kiryu, it's very interesting because he almost has like very robotic looking Mechagodzillas, but then very like almost organic looking Mechagodzillas that are pretty fascinating to look at. He almost already also made like I think maybe this might have been from like '93, like an all red Mechagodzilla and then like a green military camo
Yeah,
colored Mechagodzilla. It's all
yeah,
fascinating looking at these
that's
past
that
designs.
was the original color design for in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
yeah. So it was for that film, not the Kiryu films.
yeah, and I gotta say that the Kiryu design for looks of it kind of look bone machine looking because you could tell it's like some of the parts of it looks like bone looking of the
Yeah, and I do
skeleton.
like the as a suit, it looks way more flexible, giving the suit actor more mobility than like say the '93 Mechagodzilla suit, which is just like all armor, making it like very stiff. Whereas this one, there's segmented armor, and in between the armor, there's like metal rubber wires to cover up the gaps in the armor, so like it's
Yeah,
those black rubber gaps in between all the segments that gives it that more flexibility to move around. And I
yeah,
think like I wish I knew who portrayed Kiryu suit acting wise, but I will say that whoever portrayed him did like a fantastic job at just giving this character a lot that same level of presence that Tomo Kitagawa gave to Godzilla. Oh, it was actually Motokuni Nakagawa, who I actually saw in person 2 weeks ago at All Monsters Attack in Los Angeles. He portrayed not only Mechagodzilla, but he also portrayed Kaiser Ghidorah in Final Wars and portrayed multiple Pink Rangers in the Super Sentai franchise, earning him the nickname Mr. Pink. Because if you didn't know, majority of the time the stunt actor who portrays the Pink Rangers and the female Rangers are usually men as well.
wow.
So
It,
yeah, both God in this movie, both Godzilla and Mechagodzilla were portrayed by Super Sentai stunt actors. Godzilla Tomo Kitagawa often portrayed black, blue, and green Rangers, and Nakagawa portrayed Pink Rangers. Because hey, someone's got to do the job.
yeah, is yeah, we gotta finish the job. Hmm. Yeah, and also I forgot to mention what I didn't thought of this. I mean, I mentioned earlier about the eyes turn red. I mean,
Sure.
when the red eyes turn red when it was all blood. I mean, I wondered if that's like the actual DNA of the original Godzilla.
It could
Because
be.
that the red lights are blood because that means it's like that's the original Godzilla's DNA.
It could be, or I don't know. For me personally, I just think it's just a neat little aesthetic choice made by the designers.
Yeah, and also like I liked why uh when the main character like Atani like save one of her pilots and they and I say like I forgot to mention that one of the curious squads. I mean that one of the brothers the that were killed by Godzilla, and then in the beginning that the one brother is always goes against Atani.
Yeah, yeah. There is like that, that a-hole pilot who's always got a bone to pick with Akane, and he's always got a bad attitude, and it's the guy who's
Yeah,
sort of there to reinforce that guilt that Akane has from all those years ago. I do like what they did with him. He went from just completely having just a nasty attitude when it came to her presence on the Kiryu squad. Later on, she rescues him, and it eventually comes around to doing the same for her, trying to sacrifice himself for her sake, only for Akane to sort of like try to find a way to get rid of Godzilla and keep everyone alive at the same time. I do like that. It's a nice little subplot that pays off in a satisfying way, I think, by the end of the movie.
yeah, and I also like uh, after she rescued him. I mean, but he never forgives her of that. I mean, and I also like the part in that one scene when all the pilots agreed to have Antani as the part of the Curious Squad, but the brother never agrees with them, and he just walks out saying, "Oh, great, now you're on her side." And the one guy saying, "Cut the crap, we're fighting Godzilla, not Atani." That's one of my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
parts. And
Oh yeah, it's a good nice bit of drama there for Akane's development.
yeah, and I also like the part when they're trying to fix Kiryu. I mean, Godzilla arrives in in Tokyo or some, I don't know where the second fight took place
Mhm.
in in which
I
city.
want to say it was Yokohama. Oh, you know what? I do. Okay, I remember this. So I remember when Godzilla shows up for the second time. I think maybe I'm not sure if it's the first time or the second or third time, but there was that. I wrote in my notes here. It was because it felt like they had like a big collaboration. Sea Paradise. So there's this like aquatic theme park, aquarium, pseudo like family
Oh
attraction
yeah,
place called Sea Paradise with this big little pyramid structure.
oh
And
yeah,
it's
that one
go
part when
ahead.
Godzilla arrives and it,
Yeah. And he destroys it before he leaves. And I feel like that had to have been like a collaboration because they spent an awful lot of time on those sea paradise, signs and whatnot. So I feel like that might have been just like, advertising for them. And the funny thing is, I remember that it's in Yokohama, which was the area that Alyssa used to be stationed at. And I remember that like she and I talked about potentially visiting Sea Paradise if we could find it. We never got around to going there, but it was just kind of funny because I remember vividly saying, "Hey, if we're going to check out a bunch of real life Godzilla locations from the various different movies, what if we were to go to Sea Paradise?" It was just like a one-off idea we had. We just never followed up on it, just because there were a lot more other locations that were more interesting for us to check out.
yeah, I mean, Sea Paradise, that was like a fun place to go if I go to Japan.
Yeah. It would be cool. Um, I would say that more than likely, honestly, I would say like just having traveled, done a fair share of traveling in Japan, more than likely they might not have any like how would you call this? Might not have, and if you want to go there and buy a ticket and whatnot, you probably have to do it all in Japanese. So just be ready for
Yeah.
that
Oh yeah, and
for potential language barrier issues there.
oh yeah,
Um, Thankfully, if you want to go to like Tokyo Disneyland, don't worry, they got everything in English there for you.
yeah, and I gotta say, like, so is I want to talk about when they finally have Kiryu arrive at the city to fight Godzilla for the second time. When they release Kiryu, have him
Sure.
in flying mode. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they actually use some better quality CGI on it. But before they use CGI, they actually, while filming, they actually took some pictures of the small original model of Kiryu,
Hmm.
and they actually took pictures of it first, and they
Yeah.
just kind of like, yeah, did
Scanned
some
it.
CG, yeah, like they kind
Oh.
of, yeah, it has some CGI effects to it
Yeah.
for that scene,
Right.
because doing it with a rubber suit, I mean, it will be difficult to use on the for the blue screen.
Right. That would be pretty difficult, especially given the various angles that they had of the flying Kiryu.
Yeah, and also there is a one character in in this one part in the hospital that it has the character from Godzilla versus Megaguirus. It,
Oh.
that's the main character from that film. She plays a nurse in that scene for a
Oh,
cameo.
she's the one that rescued the child, right, from the
Yeah.
hospital. Oh, so that was she was the main actress from Megaguirus. Wow, that's really
Yep.
cool. Nice. Kind of funny that she ends up having that nice little cameo where she's essentially rescued by this movie's female protagonist.
Yep. And I also like the part when Godzilla is about to blow his atomic breath, and
Hmm.
but Kiryu just kind of knocks him on the side, and he's just
Yeah. More of that blue screen magic going on right there. And it does lead to perhaps like, and for me, the funniest moment in the movie where Godzilla is literally just like flying in like a straight line into a building. He's not like, aiming down at the ground. He's just going straight like a goddamn puppet, like a Muppet character being shot, like Gonzo being shot out of a cannon.
uh, yeah, and then when Godzilla was knocked out in the air when he first landed after Kiryu knocked him down, I mean,
Yeah.
they did use a little prop of Godzilla on a blue
Mm,
screen effect.
yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then I don't want to mention like about these things that
Like
are
the
on
jetpack.
Kiryu. Yeah, I
Or like, yeah, the backpack. Yeah, yeah. It's a fun it's a neat
backpack
accessory.
backjack.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a fun accessory. Both the gauntlet, the blue gauntlets, and big, rocket launcher jetpack combo. I feel like them. I wouldn't be surprised if that turned out to have been like a carryover from the Super Mechagodzilla design from 1993.
Yeah, that
Maybe
was
they just like, because he also had those shoulder cannons, and maybe they liked that concept so much that they kept it for both this movie and Tokyo SOS's version.
yeah,
Um, mhm.
yeah,
What was
and
it? Oh, Laura. Laura, sorry. Laura just had a comment saying they made a Sofubi figure of her in her nurse outfit from this movie before they made one of her in her G Grasper outfit from Megaguirus. That's really awesome. I didn't know that.
wow, I did not know that either.
Yeah, it's not every day that you see like a action figure of a human character from these movies.
Yep, I
But yeah,
actually
yeah.
have
Go
both
ahead.
figures with the different jetpacks.
Nice. I'm curious to know which one's your favorite, the O2 version or the O3 version,
This is
blue or silver.
it's a hard choice. I would say both
Okay.
because I
For me,
couldn't decide.
go. Yeah, for me, blue has always been my favorite color. If my work doesn't make it obvious, but I would say like the one from this movie from X Mechagodzilla. I feel like the silver and blue make a nice contrast with each other.
Yeah, they do like it's. I also love the little side weapons on the
Yeah,
arms
yeah, like
and
the gauntlets, little lasers, and like the electric mazer sword thing. That was pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah, and then Godzilla just destroys them, and then they just release that jet, and then they just leave Kiryu like an all normal form, like in the
Yeah,
original
more
era
stripped
film.
down version.
Yeah, and they finally go into like full battle without fire missiles or atomic breath. It just
Yeah,
uh,
just a straight up like, smackdown between both monsters in that classic, pro wrestler style kaiju fight as Japanese producers like to call it.
and there's a little reference style file to this one scene that kind of represent from King Kong versus Godzilla. Like, that one scene in King Kong versus Godzilla when Kong grabs Godzilla by the tail. It was
Yeah,
full of
yeah.
light and energy. It just swings him off. It swings his tail, and then Kiryu does the same thing to Godzilla in this one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very fun moment. It's one of those where it's like, it's really fun to watch this movie that knows how to have moments of just like goofy kaiju fun, along with moments of drama and pathos and all that kind of stuff. It strikes that nice balance, I think.
Yeah, and because the director for this film like wanted to bring one of the old Shona fight styles back, and then because he watched King Kong versus Godzilla and it's one of his favorite Godzilla films he ever watched, and he actually wanted to bring that
Mhm.
fight style in this one for Kiryu to grab Godzilla by the tail.
Nice, nice. I know when it comes to the director Masami Tezuka, I believe he worked as a secondary assistant director for the Heisei movies before then becoming an assistant director for the Rebirth of Mothra movies. So like he was someone who has been involved with Godzilla for at least 10 years up to that point before eventually getting promoted to, big time director. And so it is interesting to see that, for someone who grew up on Godzilla and then worked on Godzilla and then finally gained the chance to be the head of a Godzilla production, to then sort of have this movie sort of be like a hodgepodge of different styles of what came before mixed in with his own unique brand of Godzilla military drama storytelling.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's what that's what he was before he directed some of the Millennium Godzillas. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think you mentioned this earlier that Hatani is like, yeah, she well first like Kiryu runs out of power, and then Atani just wants to it has no choice but decide to pilot in Kiryu, and but in like Batman style, because the
Mm-hmm.
one scene she used the gravity hook to she used Batman's gravity hook, and it
Mm-hmm.
just climbs in. I mean, like I don't know how they made those gravity hooks in this film. I mean, and
Who's to say? Maybe it just could be more of that like goofy sci-fi technology sort of deal they got going on here.
yeah, and she actually kind of speaks to Kiryu.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned it earlier before that this movie
Yeah,
feels like by the end of the movie this feels like a mecha anime, and that's definitely a trope of a lot of mecha anime, of characters speaking to their pilots speaking to their giant robots as if they were like their partner in crime, or some sort of familial figure to them. And I do like that part where she enters Mecha Godzilla's cockpit and controls him from the inside, where it's like, okay, I know you're a living thing. I'm a living thing. So I'm going to put my
yeah,
life on the line. So I protect you. You protect me. We're both, let's have each other's backs. It's a nice moment there.
yeah. And I know it makes you feel like she's not actually speaking to Kiryu. I mean, to me, it kind of feels like she's talking to the spirit of the original Godzilla. That
Potentially,
Godzilla,
yeah. Or it could be
like
that she's speaking to herself as well. Maybe she has her own sense of like self-doubt at that moment, and she's trying to talk herself out of it and saying, hey, you can do this.
yeah, and I also love the ended part. It's like when Kiryu finally put an end to Godzilla. I mean, and also I forgot to mention. I mean, before I get to the ended part, I mean, I want to talk
Mhm.
about the fight scene during night. The the night fight scene. I mean,
Yeah.
I know some Godzilla films had, like, especially the MonsterVerse has some fight scenes. They fight at night, and they
Hmm.
sometimes some fans say they have hard time seeing some
Oh
fights
yeah,
in the
because
dark.
there's always like a lot of dusty clouds in 2014's part, or like a lot of heavy weather in King of the Monsters part, or what do you call it? Like just like bad poor transfers in 2014's Blu-rays case. Yeah, yeah, a lot of these like mainstream big budget CGI blockbuster monster movies tend to put in like a lot of like heavy weather effects and particle effects. I feel like it's mostly a means of hiding whatever imperfections the CG animation has. Whereas in this case, everything can be seen clearly. And it really, watching this movie again really makes me miss those days of, practical suits and effects and proper studio lighting and whatnot, where it seems like beyond the Ultraman franchise, it feels like a real lost art that it's a shame that this, like, you no longer see big budget movie productions of this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's in the previous Millennium era films, say the Godzilla 2000 and Mechagodzilla, say the night fight scenes, say those are the ones that are like the dark that are like the darkest nights fights. I mean, like for Orga fight and the GMK fight. I mean, but and against Mechagodzilla, I mean, the night fight scene at the end doesn't look so dark or
Mhm.
shadowy looking. You just
No, no,
see
yeah.
you just see it all clearly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember I'm a big fan of these YouTubers by the name of Red Letter Media, and I remember one of the guys from that YouTube channel talked about this, how a lot of modern Hollywood movies try to be realistic with their dark lighting, but because they try to go realistic, you can't see anything. Whereas, prior movies, they would often have a lot of stylish lighting to where it's not realistic, but it's enough to convince you it's nighttime, but you can still see everything, and everything not only looks good but also feels good and all that stuff. So I feel like this movie in particular is a great example. In fact, this and the other movies that you mentioned, whether it's G2K or Mechagodzilla, GMK, all of their night scenes look wonderful by comparison because they know how to properly light a scene that is visible but also conveys the feeling that this is taking place at night.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, so for this film and Tokyo SOS, like those like the only two Millennium films that actually took place of the fight scenes at night, but you could see clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
and let's get back to the ended part where I left off. I mean, I also
Sure.
like the part when the when the one guy has always been against Atani, and then when he was in the jet, he was trying to sacrifice himself, and then it's like,
Yeah.
but he have the jet in Godzilla's mouth,
Right.
and it's part when it, but he actually tries to save Atani, but because he says like, forget about me, just fire it now, and but she wouldn't let him die because
Hmm.
so he just I like, but I just love the part when Kiryu grabs Godzilla by the mouth so he won't fire his atomic breath, and he
Hmm.
carries him back to the ocean. And for that shot, like when he's doing like a little twirl thing, I mean,
Oh, spinning around. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how they. I know it doesn't look that much CGI look into it. I mean, I don't know how they do that part. I mean, I like,
Might be blue screen.
yeah, it could be, but I just don't know how they do it. I mean, maybe they kind of add some CGI effects to it. I mean, I'm not sure. If the people in the chat knows, please, if you think that's all CGI or they use blue screen, let us know in the comments below. And
Um, Go ahead.
and I also love the ice effect when the water just blows, and then they all ice effects are starting to freeze, and
Yeah, I'd
that's
say that might be like the best CGI in my opinion in the film.
yeah, and then Godzilla appears again, but no sign of Kiryu yet, and then they actually left a big scar on Godzilla's chest.
Yeah, yeah. Which would then, of course, lead to perhaps like my favorite all-time favorite Godzilla design for Tokyo SOS. So I always thought that that scar chest scar was so badass looking.
Hmm. And I don't know how that chest scar happened. Well, I don't know.
Well,
It's
I'm
like,
assuming that's just like the effect of the absolute zero cannon having that point blank range into the chest. It wasn't enough to freeze Godzilla, but it was enough to just do some real bad damage to his chest.
yeah, and I heard that there was the original ended for this. They when they have Godzilla shift away, but they feed Kiryu, but they left Altana to die.
Hmm.
Yeah, but that's the ending was scrapped, and
Uh huh.
yeah, and but they have Kiryu survive, but with a missing arm.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I remember the SH figure art, the SH Monster Arts figure has an accessory to create that battle damage look. at the end of that movie, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, and I did have another Kiryu Bandai figure in my other room that the one R you just easily come off easily.
Right, right.
Yeah, but yeah, I thought, but it was on the other side of the arm, and yeah, whenever I use one of the figures to play with, whenever whenever time I come up with my own ending, I would just take that arm off of the figure and just leave it just like in the movie.
Right, right. I used to do the same thing with my old, as when I was like in kindergarten. I used to have like those what was it called, Trendmasters Mechagodzilla figure, and I would rip the head off to replicate the look of like Showa Mechagodzilla when it got its head ripped off. I wasn't supposed to rip it off, but I was a dumb kid. I didn't know that that wasn't a feature.
Yeah, and yes. So yeah, and there's also the one scene that the director wanted in the film, but they didn't really they didn't really he didn't really put this in the film yet, but he came up with the idea like for Atani survived after she got out of the kiryu that they kind of wants her to swim across the ocean to shore in her swimsuit.
Huh.
That's what I heard. That's what the director thought, but he thought it was like,
yeah. Maybe the director was like, "Hey, she used to be one of them sexy gravure models, or however you pronounce it. Let's put her in a swimsuit. Why not?" And probably someone at Toho was like, "Are you insane, sir?" He's like, "A little. I am working on Godzilla after all."
Yeah, yeah, and there was, a few years ago, I can't remember. I think during the time when the Blu-ray films were released. I don't know, but I think before that, when I used to have the DVD of it, that sometimes I don't watch the whole credits ended parts where the credits shows.
Right.
But until a few years ago, like when I rewind through the credits, and I didn't know there was another scene after the credits.
Oh yeah. With her and the father and daughter.
Yeah, but she didn't won. She says it was a draw.
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh, so I'll pay for your guys' dinner." And the father was like, "Yeah, we got in."
Yeah, so it's like the guy's like, "I'm in."
Yeah, it'd be a cute moment if it weren't for my issues with their age gap.
Yeah,
but you know what? It does, like, I like the final freeze frame where she does like a salute for Mechagodzilla before heading off, and it makes me think, well, how cool would it have been had we have continued following Akane's character for Tokyo SOS and potentially more movies down the line. But for some godforsaken reason, they decided, hey, let's take this very interesting character we spent the last movie building up and just not do anything with her. Let's just send her character off to the US to train some new next generation pilots and have a new, in my opinion, significantly less interesting character take over for her.
Yep. Yeah, that's what they did in the next film.
Yeah, but that's another discussion for another time where I'm not involved.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, so we're just about that time, and then I just want to say, Andre, that thank you so much for joining me in this episode. I'm been looking forward to doing this with you, and that I'm sorry we couldn't do this like a week ago or two. You were busy with the All Monsters Attack convention in is it in California? And
yeah, Los Angeles.
Yeah, I actually, believe me, I haven't been to Los Angeles in years.
Trust me, you don't want to come here.
I already did.
It's an insanely crazy huge city. It's too big. It's too big of a city. It takes like 2 hours just to get from one side of the city to the next, just because of how awful traffic is
And
there.
believe me, it's been 7 years since I've been to Los Angeles to this
Mm,
very month. Actually,
wow.
yep, 7 years I've been to Los Angeles. I actually got to get to see the Godzilla Walk of Fame
Oh,
uh,
nice.
after the release of Final Wars.
That is awesome, man.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience that I went to Hollywood.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. For anybody who's coming into visiting Hollywood for the first time, barring all the weird, potentially creepy, dangerous people you'll meet on the streets,
Oh my God.
it is pretty fun to check out the Walk of Fame.
Yeah, Walk of Fames are so much fun to check out. I mean, so yeah, and I would definitely talk about. I would like to talk about more about the Godzilla Walk of Fame when I get to my Godzilla Final War episode.
Sure. Yeah. Go right ahead, man. More power to you. And yeah, thank you again for inviting me on here. It's been an absolute blast being here and just, talking about this fun movie from 20 years ago now, almost
Yeah,
21 years
yep,
come
21 years.
November. Yeah. Yeah. So, this movie's almost old enough to drink now, which is insane. Again, insane to think about. But yeah, thank you again. Thank you very much to everybody in the chat who has been following us along this conversation of ours, and thank you to everybody who will potentially see this video well after we're off the air. And if you'd like to follow me on
Yep,
my body of work, you can follow me on YouTube at Kaiju Noir, KAIJUNOIR. You can follow me on Instagram at Kaiju Noir. You can follow me on Twitter at PW_Draco Azul, and you can follow me on Facebook at Primal Warrior Draco Azul, all of which I don't do a whole lot of reviews and podcasts these days. Mainly, my priorities have been focused more on my comic book series, Primal Warrior Draco Azul. Since we just talked about giant robots, this thing is all about giant monsters, giant robots. It's Power Rangers, it's Ultraman, it's Godzilla, it's all that classic kaiju versus mecha action, all set to a Mexican backdrop for a bit of that unique cultural flair to help it stand out from the rest of the crowd. We've got issues 1, issues 2, and issues 3, all available physically and digitally on Amazon, Kindle, and Comixology. In addition to that, I also have a series of novels. First one being Primal Warrior Draco Azul, Full Metal Chronicles, Primal Warrior Draco Azul, Soulless Blood, and finally, a post-apocalyptic Godzilla versus Gundam-esque story that a crossover that I wrote with Matthew Denian, Atomic Rex 5, Ballad of Bravura.
wow.
So yeah, this is a post-apocalyptic kaiju versus mecha story where it's, like I said, it's essentially Godzilla versus Gundam in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of Mexico. So yeah, and this is published from Severed Press, also available physically and digitally on Amazon. So yeah, you can check it out, you can read it, you can review it, you can like it, you can share it. And if you want to know any more about my future projects that I have in store for you guys, just follow me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook for all the latest updates.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those, Andres. I mean, like like you heard the man said. I mean, if you want to subscribe to his channel, click on the link in the description down below. And I want to thank you again so much, Andres. And hopefully, I'll get to do another podcast episode with you someday. Maybe along with Matt from Austrosy and or with Kaiju Kim or the others you know.
Absolutely, man. Go for it.
Yep. And so next episode will be the sequel to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The next Kiryu movie is Godzilla Tokyo SOS from 2003. And like I say in Japanese, Saranawa.
Jane, everybody.